We begin this newscast with breaking news that President Donald Trump says he's expecting a ceasefire sometime next week. Also developing at this hour, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has now confirmed he will be flying to meet President Donald Trump at the White House, in addition to other senior American officials next week. Now, it all comes amidst the ongoing pressure and push to get a ceasefire and hostage deal secured between Israel and Hamas. It's the third time now the Prime Minister is going to the White House to meet with Trump since he took office in January. Here's what else you need to know. Exactly 2 weeks ago, since the Trump brokered ceasefire deal between Israel and Iran was established, Prime Minister Netanyahu will be meeting President Trump at the White House on Monday, July 7th. On the table to discuss is the war inside of Gaza, as President Trump has been pushing to end the almost 2-year war after apparent momentum was built from the Iran-Israel ceasefire. Ending the war and bringing back the 50 hostages that are still in captivity is top priority for President Trump, according to the White House spokeswoman, including the 2 American hostages that are also still in Gaza, which is Itai Chen and Omer Nutra. The White House did confirm Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, is currently in Washington this week, meeting with officials at the White House.
This has been a priority for the president since he took office, to end this brutal war in Gaza. It is because of this president that humanitarian aid is being brought into the region. It's heartbreaking to see the images that have come out from both Israel and Gaza throughout this war, and the president wants to see it end. He wants to save lives. And however, the main priority for the president also remains to bring all of the hostages home out of Gaza. As you know, his tireless effort has brought home many of the hostages, including all of the American hostages who were held there. So he wants to see both things happen, and we're continuing to work very hard to do those things.
Another topic on the table is Iran, after hostilities from the 12-day war ended, despite the IDF chief of staff saying last week the campaign against Iran is not over yet. Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed members of the Israeli army leadership, saying the Middle East would collapse without Israel because of Iran's overall threat to the West.
הם בנו בעצם 3 מסלולי השמדה. אחד, טבעת החנק. תוכנית להשמדת ישראל באמצעות הציר. השני, תוכנית להשמדת ישראל באיום טילאי. והשלישי, תוכנית להשמדת ישראל באיום גרעיני. זה רזון דטר של המשטר. זה לא הסיבה היחידה שהם רוצים להשמיד אותנו, ואנחנו לא המטרה העיקרית שלהם. אבל כדי לממש את המטרות העיקריות, הם חייבים לסלק אותנו. אי אפשר לכבוש את המזרח התיכון בלי להשמיד את ישראל. ואם אין ישראל, המזרח התיכון קורס מיד.
And it's day 634 of the war in Gaza. Amid speculation about a possible ceasefire in the coming days, the IDF ground and air operations have been intensifying. In Khan Yunis, IDF engineers destroyed a 2-kilometer-long Hamas tunnel located beneath a former school, according to the military. And the army located a terror hideout and eliminated threats in joint ground and air operations. The tunnel was about 20 meters deep and was used by Hamas as a hideout for military preparations. The Army says that in recent weeks, the Armored Brigade, in coordination with the Air Force, dismantled hundreds of military sites from both the ground and the air, locating weapons and eliminating dozens of terrorist gunmen. The IDF says it now holds most of the Gaza territory and has achieved goals set by the government. And U.S. President Donald Trump issued an executive order ending the Syrian sanctions program. The move comes as Israeli officials now confirm that with Washington's mediation, Israel is in advanced talks for a deal to end hostilities with Syria. Here's more with ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
President Trump's decision to end Syrian sanctions follows his meeting in May in Saudi Arabia with Syrian leader al-Shara. The White House says that Washington's move was meant to show support for Syria to continue in a positive direction.
And this is in an effort to promote and support the country's path to stability and peace. The order will remove sanctions on Syria while maintaining sanctions on the former President Assad, his associates, human rights abusers, drug traffickers, persons linked to chemical weapons activities, ISIS and their affiliates, and Iranian proxies.
According to Israeli officials, Jerusalem and Damascus are forging a pact that would fall short of a full peace. Israeli leaders made clear that the Golan Heights Heights, annexed by Israel some 40 years ago, will remain in Israel and is not up for discussion. Senior officials said the goal is to reach a bilateral agreement that halts hostilities between the countries at war since Israel came into existence. Israeli officials say there are aspirations to expand the Abraham Accords, and it's no secret that Israel wants to see Syria included. Talks currently are focused on security matters, but could also potentially include normalization of relations. Syrian officials sent out feelers to Israel back in April through several European countries, with the U.S. taking the lead on mediation. National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi is leading talks on the Israeli side. After the fall of the al-Assad regime, the IDF moved troops into the Syrian Golan to fill the void being filled by terrorists. Israel had until recently adopted a belligerent stand toward the new Islamist-led government in Syria. However, the rhetoric has changed amid U.S. efforts to usher in a deal between Washington and Damascus that extends to Jerusalem.
Thank you, Steve, for that report. And as the IDF ground and air operations presses on in Gaza amidst pressure for a ceasefire hostage deal, joining us now to discuss is former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Orin. Michael, thanks so much for being with us today.
Good to be with you, shows.
First off, what does the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump signal next week? We know that the topics that we're hearing about right now, they might be discussing, of course, is the deal, a possible deal in Gaza, and Iran that's on the table. But what does this signal to us?
Well, first of all, it's a big table. The big issue now is what will happen if Iran tries to rebuild some of the nuclear facilities that were either obliterated, according to the president, or severely damaged, according to other sources. What will constitute a violation of the ceasefire in America's eyes? And if so, what is America willing to do, or what is America willing to let Israel do in response? To me, in many ways, that's the sort of the key issue here. Does Iran remain sort of out of the picture, or will Iran be able to reconstitute itself and rearm its proxies in the region? That's regarding Iran. Regarding Gaza specifically, what's on the table is the nature of the ceasefire. Now, Israel is willing to agree to a ceasefire in return for a certain number of hostages, but Israel wants to retain the right to renew fighting after the ceasefire expires. Now, that's a condition that Hamas adamantly rejects. Hamas wants the end of the war so it basically can win the war and come out of the tunnels and declare victory and begin to reconstitute its power in Gaza. So there's kind of almost a symmetry between the situation in Iran and the situation in Gaza, you know, albeit at much bigger dimensions in Iran. But the question is, to what degree is the United States willing to stand behind Israel and its current government, because not everyone agrees with the position of the government, certainly about Gaza, in assuring that Israel will have the ability to act if a ceasefire is violated and if the regime in Iran or Hamas in Gaza moves to rearm and reorganize.
Now, specifically back to the sticking points of this deal, you mentioned Israel wanting to go back in after, a temporary ceasefire happens. But this is something that's been going on now for months and months of being negotiated. How can there actually be a ceasefire? What will it take for a ceasefire to actually happen at this point in time? These are points that continue to be negotiated, and nothing has succeeded at this point in time.
Well, there are people in this country, and that could be a majority according to some polls, and significant members of the coalition even have said, okay, is enough enough. Let's just have an open-ended ceasefire and get all the hostages back. Give Hamas what it wants. Let Hamas come out of the tunnels and try to deal with the mess that's Gaza. And should they ever attack us again, even with a single rocket, we'll go back in and destroy them and have the Americans guarantee our ability to do that. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been very reluctant to agree to such a condition. He remembers Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon in 2000, when then Prime Minister Ehud Barak said, well, if Hezbollah violates the ceasefire, we can go back in. Netanyahu remembers Israel's withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, when Prime Minister Ariel Sharon said, well, if Hamas violates the ceasefire, we can go back in. Once you're getting out, it's not so easy to go back in. That's the lesson of history. So now we'll try to convince the president in Washington to stand by him as he says, okay, the only agreement that Israel can truly accept will be one that will enable Israel at the end of the ceasefire, should it choose to renew the fighting.
Right. I mean, once Netanyahu and Trump meet, would it be possible for immediate change to come out of this type of meeting? What realistically will happen here?
Yeah. Well, my sources in Washington are telling me some very fantastic things, that President Trump has not abandoned his idea of creating a resort-type area in Gaza. And as Israel has been gaining control over 75% of the Strip, moving the population, Palestinian population southward, it could easily be interpreted as a precursor to the realization of President Trump's vision of this, this Riviera on the Mediterranean. So you can't rule that out either. There are many options here. And I think it's clear, though, that the Prime Minister and the President want to see an end to the fighting in Gaza. And keep in mind, it's not just the Palestinians are suffering, Israelis are suffering. We've lost 20 soldiers this month alone fighting in Gaza. And increasingly, Israelis are uncertain, unclear, what are these soldiers dying for?
Right. What can President Trump's influence be on a ceasefire? You just mentioned what your sources are telling you about, his plan to continue to turn Gaza into a Riviera at some point. But ultimately, how do you get Hamas out of the Gaza Strip? It seems as if they continue to recruit people inside parts in specific parts of the Gaza Strip.
Well, they're recruiting thousands, but most of them are young people, and they can't really be trained. So they don't constitute the same type of military threat. I remember I mentioned the asymmetry between Iran and Gaza, but there's a broader symmetry, and that is Israel has won a partial military victory in Gaza. It has won a partial military victory in Lebanon against Hezbollah, and a partial military victory against Iran. We haven't defeated Hamas entirely, we haven't defeated Hezbollah entirely, and we haven't defeated Iran entirely militarily. But what we have won in Gaza, and certainly in Lebanon, is a strategic victory, that neither Hamas nor Hezbollah no longer threaten us the way they did before the war. And it's led to be seen whether, Iran will go back to pose a strategic threat against the State of Israel, and whether Hamas will go back to pose a strategic threat to the State of Israel. That's really what's on the table here, shows how do we move forward and build on these military victories, which, although partial, can lead to a strategic triumph, which will change the entire Middle East. We can have peace with Syria, peace with Lebanon, peace with other countries in the region, but only provided that Iran and its proxies cannot regroup and rearm.
Let's talk about Iran just very, very fast. Could military operations continue inside of the Islamic Republic?
Yes, because I'm unconvinced that the Iranian public is going to desist and just sort of accept its fate. The Iranian leaders may view this war very differently. They could think that, well, we've held out against the world's biggest military power. We caused extensive damage to Israel. We learned Israel's weak point, which is civilian casualties. We have a president of the United States who bombed nuclear facilities, but when we shot rockets back at Qatar, the United States immediately sued for a ceasefire and pressured Israel to accept that ceasefire. They could do this very differently, and if I were a betting man, I would say that they're going to try to test this ceasefire. They're going to try to see whether we're going to try building one of the nuclear facilities, or rearming the ballistic missile arsenals, or the restoring the launchers, and see whether the United States will react, and whether the United States will let Israel react.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Michael Orin. Thank you for your perspective, as always, here.
Thank you, Susan.
Israel Bonds, the heartbeat of solidarity, the powerhouse of support. When the Israeli-Hamas war hit, Israel Bonds stood tall, proving we're more than just an investment, we're a lifeline. Israel Bonds pledges to ensure Israel thrives and flourishes. Investing in Israel bonds isn't just a financial move, it's a declaration for resilience, strength, and a better future for Israel. Join us and let solidarity echo through generations.
And an unprecedented vote in Israel's parliament may force Arab-Israeli member of Knesset Ayman Odeh out of the Knesset. Critics accuse him of supporting terror. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has the report.
The Knesset House Committee voted 14-2 on Monday in favor of expelling Hadash-Tal chairman Ayman Odeh from the parliament. The decision now heads to the full Knesset, where 90 votes are required for final approval. Odeh has the right to appeal to the Supreme Court. The push to remove him follows controversial remarks, including a statement that Gaza has won and Gaza will win, as well as perceived support for Palestinian prisoners and refusal to label Hamas or Hezbollah as terror groups. Supporters of the ouster, including MK Limor Son Harmelach from the Otzma Yehudit party, called it a moral necessity. She said there's no justification for someone who celebrates terrorists with blood on their hands to serve in Israel's legislature. But the move has also sparked intense backlash. MK Gilad Kariv warned it's not about one man, but an attempt to silence Arab political voices. This is 100% political and 0% legal, he said. Odeh's lawyer argued that the case rests on one tweet and lacks the legal basis required for removal. Emotions flared during the Monday session. Families of hostages and terror victims gave heartbreaking testimony, while others, like Danny Elgert, whose brother was murdered in captivity, defended Odeh, saying he personally paid a condolence visit. Several disruptions led to shouting and the removal of MKs and grieving relatives from the chamber. The final outcome now depends on a Knesset supermajority and potentially a court challenge.
Thanks, Mayan, for that report. And in a political bombshell, former cabinet member Gadi Eisenot has announced that he is leaving the National Unity Party led by Benny Gantz and plans to quit the Knesset. Eisenot is a popular figure in the country, and the announcement comes after the former IDF chief of staff said that he was not convinced by Gantz's proposal for party primaries. It's uncertain what Eisenot will do next, but there are reports that Yair Lapid is trying to bring Eisenot into the leadership of the Yesh Atid party. It seems clear that Eisenot is leaving the Knesset with the intention of finding a new political home ahead of the next national election. Gantz issued a statement saying that in recent weeks, significant ideological and conceptual gaps emerged between him and Eisenot. Both men emphasized shared goals and the desire for continued cooperation. And the UK Supreme Court ruled that the British government's decision to allow the export of F-35 fighter jets components to Israel was legal. Now, the judges ruled that blocking the export was the prerogative of the executive, which had warned against undermining U.S. trust in Britain. The courts effectively dismissed an anti-Israel group that challenged this legal case. The direct export to Israel of UK-made F-35 components is still suspended. France, Spain, and the Netherlands and the UK have imposed partial or full arms embargoes on Israel during the course of the Gaza war. But British parts are part of a global F-35 spare parts pool from which Israel can place orders. The U.S.-based Lockheed Martin produces the F-35 with contributions from Northrop Grumman and the UK-based BAE Systems. And an elderly victim in last month's Boulder, Colorado firebombing attack at a hostage protest has died of her wounds. The death of 82-year-old Karen Diamond turns the attack on peaceful marchers for Israeli hostages now into a possible death penalty case. Egyptian-born Mohammed Sabri Soliman is charged with the attack after authorities say he threw Molotov cocktails into the crowd in what may be an act of anti-Semitism. Diamond's death prompted the Boulder District Attorney to file a new charge of first-degree murder. And Colorado abolished the death penalty in 2020, but federal prosecutors under President Donald Trump could seek the death penalty for Soliman. He is already charged with hate crimes in the June 1st attack, which called attention to growing anti-Semitic rhetoric and violence in the United States. And the city of Bat Yam has arranged a memorial ceremony for the Ukrainian nationals who were killed in an Iranian ballistic missile strike on their building. The victims of the attack included a family of 5, including a 7-year-old girl who had arrived in Israel for cancer treatment, fleeing the war between Ukraine and Russia. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
The city of Bat Yam held a memorial for 5 Ukrainians that were killed in an Iranian ballistic missile attack. The family fled Ukraine following the war with Russia, seeking not only asylum, but medical attention. 7-year-old Anastasia was diagnosed with leukemia and was in Israel receiving medical treatment when her family's apartment was struck in a direct impact by an Iranian ballistic missile warhead. Scenes of the damage at the site of the impact shook the country. Images of the rubble emphasized to the Israeli public just how powerful the Iranian warheads are. At the same site, almost 20 days later, wreaths were laid by community members, Bat Yam residents and fellow Ukrainians, to pay respect to the family. Israeli officials attended the ceremony held at the scene of the impact. Also in attendance was Bat Yam Mayor Tzvika Brot, who had this to say.
And in this disaster we have 9 fatalities, including 3 children, Holocaust survivor, senior citizen. So in terms of our enemy, it doesn't matter to them who's actually living there as long as they're Jews or Israelis. And this is why we decide that we're actually going to build this building as soon as possible, higher, stronger, and much more Israelis and much more residents will be here as soon as possible.
And the father of that family survived as he stayed behind in Ukraine to fight the war against Russia. Devo, thanks so much for that emotional story. And I have with me today Hila Bernstein, a master's student at University of Haifa International, the international school at the University of Haifa, who made Aliyah from California. She's here to tell us what drew her to pursue her master's in early childhood education in Israel, how she's adjusting to life here, and what makes the University of Haifa such a meaningful place for international students. Hila, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what brought you from California to Haifa, and why did you choose to study early childhood education here?
Yeah, so I got my bachelor's in early childhood education in California, and I was born in Israel, so I thought continuing my education here would connect me to my root.
And as someone who made Aliyah just recently, how has the transition been for you?
It's been a really fun and challenging and rewarding experience connecting to myself and my family and the country.
And tell me, what surprised you most about the University of Haifa after arriving to the campus?
What surprised me the most is U Haifa International's support and care for their students. They plan events for us, they check up on us, they really want us to succeed.
And how would you describe the community of international Israeli students at the campus?
Seeing so many different cultures on campus is very fulfilling, and I have really enjoyed connecting with my classmates from all over the world as well.
When you're not in class, how have you been enjoying life in Haifa?
It's been super fun to explore the city, explore downtown, go to various beaches, and connect with my classmates as well.
And what resources or support systems at the university have had the biggest impact on you?
My program is very hands-on. They really want us to do well, both academically and professionally and personally. So it's been very fulfilling.
And looking back on your time here so far, what's one moment or experience that made you think, I'm really glad that you chose to come here?
First semester, my professor, Adar Ben Eliyahu for statistics, sometimes we would have class in the end of the day during sunset, and one day she asked us all to stop class and look outside the window and really take in the view of the sunset, and we took pictures, and it really showed me that I was part of something really unique and special.
What would you tell someone back home who's thinking about coming to Israel to study?
I would tell them to definitely do it. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to study at a really great institution and meet people from all over the world and explore what Haifa has to offer.
Hila, thanks so much.
Thank you.
You can scan the QR code on your screen to learn more about U Haifa International Open House. And let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 23 degrees Celsius or 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see sunny skies alongside hot temperatures, seeing highs of 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all of your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels and our new channel. You can also watch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Shosh Bedrosian. Thanks so much for watching.